His band originated in Pasadena in 1983. He is the co-founder, was the lead guitarist, and his band's debut album, Sign In Please, was released by RCA in 1984. It includes their biggest hit, Turn Up the Radio. RCA didn't even want to put it on the album. How crazy is that? In 1985, he won Guitar Solo of the Year from Guitar Player magazine. Jimi Hendrix inspired him to be in the music business, and he's known as the two-handed guitarist. Totally cool to be talking with Steve Lynch, formerly of the band Autograph, and dear Lord, what an amazing guitarist he is. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being on.
Woohoo! Now, 35 plus years ago, Sign In Please came out. Does it feel like it was a minute ago or 35 plus years ago?
It feels like it was 35 plus years ago. Because a lot's happened since then. So, but boy, what a great, I reminisce about those times often, and just the thought of how the whole thing came about and everything, and it's all just great memories. Just none of us expected what was going to happen. It's just, it was kind of a fluke thing, actually. I don't know if you've heard the story about how everything took place.
Please tell us, because I want to know about it.
Okay, well, we were just guys. We all knew each other from playing in different bands together, like me and the singer and the bassist were in a band called Wolfgang for a while, and then I was in a band called Looker for a while before that.
Right.
And so we all knew each other, but each of us were signed to a label playing in different projects. Me and the keyboard player were playing with Holly Penfield on Dreamland Records. The singer was playing in a group called, what was the name of it? But he was on Columbia Records. The drummer was playing in a group called The Coup on A&M Records, and Randy Rand, our bass player, was playing with Lita Ford at the time.
Oh, I love her.
And, I remember the name of the singer's group. It was with Earl Slick. It was Silver Condor.
Oh, okay.
And so what we did was we got together at Victory Studios in North Hollywood just to get together on the weekends when we had time off, just to jam and kind of write as just a side project. We weren't a band. We didn't have a name or anything. And so we started writing together, and we really liked what we were writing. And we invited Andy Johns down, who's a famous producer and engineer, his brother Glenn Johns. They're both from that Trident School of Music in England, and so they're great producers, both of them. And he came down. He loved our stuff. And so he said, hey, I got time down at Gower Studios down on Sunset Boulevard down in Hollywood. Let's go down and cut 5 songs. And we said, yeah, sure, why not? We have a little bit of time here. We've already finished recording with our other projects and everything. So we went down and cut a 5-song demo. That led into our drummer, Kenny, who was jogging every morning with David Lee Roth.
What?
The singer from Van Halen. And David asked him what he was doing, and he says, well, I'm playing in this group called The Coup, and he played him a demo, and he says, yeah, that's really good. And then he said, but I've got this new project that we're just kind of working with, and we're just kind of throwing song ideas around. And he played him that demo that we did in the studio with Andy Johns, and David loved it. And he said, you guys want to open up for us on the 1984 tour? And Kenny said, well, yeah. So anyway, Kenny asked us, and we all checked to see if we had a few months to spare to go out, and we didn't have any tour dates lined up with the other projects that we were committed to. So we went out, and we thought it was just going to be a few months. And so we gathered money, from everybody, borrowed money, and we rented a Winnebago and drove from Los Angeles to Jacksonville, Florida. And along the way, we had to come up with a name. We didn't even have a name.
So you had no name for the band. You guys were still with other bands, right? Now, didn't you have a commitment since everybody was with a label? How did that work?
Well, we had to do a lot of negotiating. Put it that way.
I was going to say, did they just release you that easily?
Yeah, pretty much so, because the albums were recorded and there were no tour dates set up. So they just said, go ahead and go out and do it. But then, when we went out on tour, the first night that we played in Jacksonville, we played in front of 18,500 people. And we just went, wow, this is a pretty good first gig.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we worked our way up the East Coast and to Madison Square Gardens and played 2 nights there. And
you still didn't. Now, when did you get your name? How did that work out?
That worked out on the Winnebago ride from Los Angeles to Florida. That's when we actually came up with the name. We just thought, well, we'll just call it Autograph because we're kind of like a signature band. We don't sound like anybody else, so
Right.
we'll just call it Autograph. And so that's how that came about. And but by the time we did reach up to New York, that's when we were getting flooded with all these offers from A&M and RCA and Warner and Geffen and everybody. And RCA offered us the best deal. They said you can keep 100% of your publishing, which is unheard of.
Wow.
Because they knew that all these other companies were vying for us. And so we went with them.
But how long was it, Steve? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but how long was it before you actually got that deal from RCA? Because you guys were on the road for a while, right? Before you even had a deal.
Well, we were only on the road for like maybe 2 months, 3
Oh, okay.
months, maybe at the most. And then we got that deal, and then we stayed out with Van Halen a couple more months. And then RCA said, okay, it's time to come home and start recording. So we went back. We all flew back to LA, and so we just went right into the studio, the record plant, right there in Los Angeles, and we started recording the first album. And we recorded it in, I think, 32 days.
Wow.
And Neil Curtin came in and did the production on it. And he did an amazing job. And so we were even still just coming up with parts while we were in the studio, actually. And when you mentioned earlier, in the intro, you were talking about RCA didn't even want that song, Turn Up the Radio, on the album. That's true. But we recorded it anyway while we were in the studio.
And thank goodness you did.
Yes, right. And they wanted to release the song Send Her to Me as the first single. And we're going, no. Radio stations are going to love this.
Right.
And so eventually we convinced them of releasing that one as the first single. And it took off. Now, what we did was we went into the studio after it was released, and we 2 days into the studio doing call letters for all of the different stations. I mean, 2 8-hour days. And we were saying, turn it up KLAC and turn it up WPFM and all that. And this is Autograph and everything. So we did that. It took us a long time, but we did like 400 stations.
Wow.
And that blew up because radio stations just really wanted to play it because of that. And so it worked out well. And then later on, RCA took credit for having us put it on the album in the first
Oh,
week.
yeah, of course. Well, hello. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you got in that Winnebago, you guys had literally just gotten together. How did you even come up with what songs you were going to do? You're opening for Van Halen. I mean, how did that all come together, a set list and all of that?
Yes, because we only had just the 5 songs that we had recorded. And so we thought, we got to come up with another 5 songs because it was like a 10-song set.
Yeah.
It actually became like a 7-song set, but we had to write 5 more, and we did that really quick, and all of those songs actually went on to the first album.
Wow.
Surprisingly enough. And but all of us were writers. All of us were pretty seasoned players, and we had all had a lot of studio experience, and writing experience. So it came together very quickly for us,
But did you feel a lot of pressure, too, as you were trying to get everything together for that tour?
Oh, God, yeah.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, because we knew that these are big arenas that are sold out. And so, we really worked hard. I mean, we were in rehearsal for, 6 hours a day, just working things out, writing more songs, and rehearsing the songs in order and everything, like we're doing a live set, and we did it on the big stage at Nate's in North Hollywood, and by the time we hit the road and got on stage for the first time, it worked out really well.
Yeah.
I mean, we kicked butt. So
now, Steve, going back just a little bit, I read that you had said Jimi Hendrix he's the one that actually inspired you to be in the music business, but my guess is that maybe before that, you also knew you were going to be in the music business someday. When was the very first moment you realized, hey, I want to play guitar. I want to do this?
1964.
Really? There's that moment.
Would be, It was that moment because my sister had just gotten the album Meet the Beatles.
Oh my
And she
goodness.
had a listening party over at her place, and everybody was going nuts. And I was only 9 years old at the time. And I pleaded with my dad to get me a guitar. So we got the Sears and Roebuck cardboard guitar for $9.95. And it was just terrible. The strings were so far off the neck, I had to stand on the neck with my foot to play a bar chord. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And so it was impossible to play. And then I met this friend of mine a couple of years later, and he wanted to put together, he was just down the block, and he wanted me to play bass. So I started playing bass at that time, although I was still playing guitar, because he was a little bit more accomplished on guitar than I was. And his name was Jerry Hendricks, believe it or not.
Really? Really?
Not Jimi Hendrix, but Jerry Hendricks.
That's funny.
And so we put a little project together, and so that was just a gas playing all these 60s songs, a lot of Beatles stuff and everything. And then, but I really wanted to play guitar. I didn't want to play bass. I really wanted to play guitar. So that's what I did was, it was the day Jimi Hendrix died. And it's funny because unfortunately my friend a couple of years before that passed away in an accident.
Oh,
the guy that I was, playing with. And so I started playing more guitar and more guitar. But the day that Jimi Hendrix passed away, I actually took my bass into Farmer's Music in Burien, just outside of Seattle, and I traded it in on a Fender Stratocaster.
Oh, wow.
And that was September 18th, 1970. And I was 15, and I traded it in for a Stratocaster, and that was it. I said, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life.
Wow.
I was such a Hendrix fan, and I was trying to learn his stuff by record, and I would wear out the record by putting the needle back on the record, because they didn't have any tapes, cassette tapes or anything back then.
Right.
It was just, you bought the acetate, and that was it.
That's right. Oh, gosh, I do remember that. Yes, I did the same thing, trying to talk up the records. Yep. Uh-huh.
And then I would have to plead with my dad to give me another $5 to go get another one, because I'd worn one out from placing the needle in the same spot trying to learn his solos.
Oh, that is So are you basically self-taught, Steve?
Pardon me?
Are you basically self-taught?
I was for the first, I would say, 5 years. Then in 1975, 76, right around in there, I started taking lessons from this guy, Don Mock, in West Seattle. And at this time I was playing professionally, because I started playing professionally when I was 18. And he started teaching me all the scales and everything, and I was just loving it, because then I realized all these different things that I could do other than just play solos verbatim. I learned how to improvise and everything. And I was learning all my theory. And we were out on tour all the time. We were playing, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Oregon, California, and British Columbia. And so I called him one time. We were in Montana actually playing. And I called up West Seattle Music to set up some more lessons. And they said, oh, he's not here. He moved down to Hollywood. They're opening up a guitar school. And I went, guitar school? What are you talking about? And they said, yeah, it's called the Guitar Institute of Technology. And so I actually called up from the hotel room down to LA, and I actually got the number. Yeah, 213-462-1385.
Stop
I
it.
still remember it. And I got this lady on the phone, and she was co-owner of it. Her and her husband owned it. And I asked for Don Mock, and he was on break from a class. And I said, Don, what's this about the new school? And he said, Steve, he said, quit your band, sell your gear, and get your butt down here.
Come on.
And 3 months later, I was there.
Really?
Yeah.
You left the music business to go there?
Yeah, I did. And so, because I just wanted to learn everything. He was such a good teacher, and all the teachers there were just phenomenal.
Wow.
It was only jazz there. So I'm the only guy with bell-bottom pants and platform shoes and a leather jacket and a solid body guitar. And they would laugh at me, and they would think it was the most ridiculous thing. But I practiced my butt off, the whole time that I was there. 10, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
And I actually started having problems with my hands back then too.
Really?
And so it paid off. I won, Student of the Year and Most Likely to Succeed award, and off I went. And so,
isn't that crazy how things work out like that, though?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I never would have imagined, but I was so absorbed in just learning everything I possibly could about guitar, because these jazz guys, they were good. And I went, boy, I'm in a whole different league here. This is like, here I am with my simple pentatonic and blues scales, just playing these riffs, and these guys really know their stuff. So I was up for quite the challenge.
But it definitely paid off for you, for sure.
It did. And it was while I was going there that I actually developed the two-handed technique. I had been doing it before in Seattle. This guy, Steve Buffington, showed me, a guitar player up there, showed me a few things to do. And so I was doing it with like one finger. But then when this guy, Emmett Chapman, who invented the instrument, the stick, I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but it's an instrument that you just play with your fingers on a fretboard, very wide, fretboard. And you play, there's 5 strings for the bass end of it, and then there's 5 strings for the high end of it, the treble end of it. And so you play each of these strings. You play the bass strings with your left hand, and you play the treble strings with your right hand. And I was amazed by his technique and the sounds that he was getting. So I asked him after he did the clinic at the Guitar Institute, I said, I said, during the clinic you mentioned that you got so far with guitar that you decided to come up with an instrument that would just accompany you all the time using both hands on the fingerboard. And he said, yeah. And I said, can you show me something? So I handed him my guitar, and he played a couple of things, and I was just completely blown away.
Wow. And
so from that point on, what I did was, and this was at the beginning of when I first started going there. This was March of 1978. And so everything that they were giving me as far as stuff to learn, I would write it down so that I could play all these different scales and arpeggios and triads and everything. I wrote it down so I could play it two-handed. And so by the end of the year, I had actually written enough for my first book, and that's when my first book came out, was after I graduated in 1979. And it took off, because Eddie Van Halen was popular at that point, and people wanted to know how to do it. So I had written a book on it, but actually how to use all 4 fingers rather than just 1 or 2.
That's crazy. And, how you even came up with that, though. But if you didn't go to learn to better your technique, do you think you would have ever even gotten to that point of being the two-handed guitarist?
No, there's no way. And that's why I tell all my students, I'm going to show you theory until you're sick of it. And a lot of them have, become actually well-known professionals. So,
do tell. Who's one of the well-knowns?
Jennifer Batten, who played with Michael Jackson, and she played with Jeff Beck.
Oh my gosh!
And there was another guy, Rocky, that played with Suicidal Tendencies.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so there was a few that really took off with their careers.
Well, give us a story about one student who really touched you in a way that you will always remember that student.
I would have to say Jennifer Batten actually wasn't a student. She was at the school with me, but she always was knocking on my door asking what I was doing. So I was just showing her, and then she took off with it on her own. But I'd have to say her, but she wasn't really a student. Like I said, she was a
peer,
just another student at the Guitar Institute. And I'm just amazed at where she took that technique and what she's doing with it still to this day. And I would say, as far as my younger students, I taught this one guy that I got him so into theory that now he's like the conductor at it's somewhere, I think it's Pittsburgh, with a Pittsburgh Orchestra or something.
Wow.
He's not actually he's like with the college.
Yeah.
He teaches there, and he's like the head of the whole orchestral department.
Wow.
And His name is Ben, and he's still doing it. I mean, he's just amazing. He just really took off, and he's just an amazing guitar player too. So that was really cool hearing about that. His mom wrote me years later, and I had no idea that any of this was going on. And so when I heard about that, I just went, wow. Because he was just a little kid when I started teaching him, and he turns into this conductor, and a brilliant guitar player. And I just went, wow.
Well, that's so cool. That must make you feel really, really good.
It really did. And most of the students that I taught, they turned out to play professionally.
Gosh.
So.
Yeah. So you're playing, it's 1975. I'm guessing you were playing rock music at that time, but then Autograph forms, and you're really known as a glam band, right?
Yeah, but, all of us were older. We were all the same age as Van Halen. In fact, I'm like a week older than Eddie Van Halen. I think David Lee Roth is just a couple months older than me. And so we were all their age. So we were more of the 70s influence, the 60s and the 70s influence, like they were. But we didn't get signed until 1984. And, we formed in October of 83, actually. That's when we officially became, a band, but without a name, because we were going out on tour with Van Halen.
Right.
So I just one of those things that just it cascaded, and it happened so quickly. In between the time when I graduated and I joined, what became Autograph. I was playing with different bands like the one I mentioned, and I was doing a lot of studio work. In fact, I did a lot of work with Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I played on some. I did 5 albums for this girl out of Japan. I can't even remember her name, but I was doing a lot of studio work, and that was paying well. That was paying the rent, so I was very happy for that. And I was playing it with 4 bands at the same time, and so it was just crazy.
Yeah, well, yeah. And speaking of crazy, so you're on tour with Van Halen. They were uber popular. I mean, they had released
that was their height.
Their 6th album came out in 1984. That was number 2 on the Billboard 200 for 5 straight weeks. I mean, everybody was smoking hot at that time. Now, that tour, tell us about behind the scenes of that tour. It started really quick for you guys, but what was it about the tour that you still remember to this day? One of the big things.
One of the big things was that I was told not to do my 2-handed technique on the tour.
Really?
That was Eddie's thing. Eddie knew about me, and he always got questions, when among his friends, hey, you ever heard this guy Steve Lynch do that stuff? He uses all 4 fingers and everything, and so I had a name in L.A. at that time for doing that technique. And like I said, I'm just like 10 days older than him, and so I really wasn't paying attention to what was going on at the radio because of the fact that I was so into my own thing. And but when they found out, their tour manager came up to me and he said, "Are you Steve Lynch?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "You're the guy that wrote the book on the 2-handed technique called The Right Touch." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, you can't do that on this tour. I'm going to break your effing hands."
What?
And I went, "What?"
Really?
Yeah. Oh, they were pretty brutal about it. And
how do you change your technique around? This is what you do. How does that work?
Well, what I had to do is I had to get up and I had to improvise my solos. I had them all worked out and everything, and it was all like all this 2-handed stuff in there. So I had to work out the solos so that I could just right on the spot. I just had to get up on stage and do that. But after a while, I just started just doing it. I just thought, you know what? If they're going to kick us off the tour, they're going to kick us off the tour.
Right.
They're not going to break my hands.
No, that would be bad. And they would get in trouble for that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I just started doing it and nobody said anything.
All right.
And
well, kudos to you.
History.
Kudos to you. Now, Turn Up the Radio. The song is epic. I just have to say, I've been listening to it since it came out. I still, every time I listen to it today, it just, I can't explain it. It's so fun. It just brings back great memories. And the video, let's talk about the video for a second. So in the beginning, it's the robot, kind of like a Styx type of thing. And then you sign the paper with your Papermate pencil. So,
Yes,
was that the whole branding, thing at the time?
it was. And the funny thing is MTV didn't want to play it.
Why?
Now, MTV was still very new at this time, if
Right.
you remember that.
Right, like 3 to 4 years into it, I think.
With what's his name, Mike Goodwin.
Yep, Mark Goodwin and Nina Blackwood and Martha Quinn.
Right. Yep, Martha Quinn and everything. And yeah, that's right. That's correct. Those were the people, Nina Blackwood and all that. So they didn't want to air it. But it was Papermate that paid the $125,000 for the video to be made.
Yeah.
So we eventually, Paul Atkinson from RCA talked them into it and said, because they didn't want any of that kind of stuff in there, any kind of endorsement stuff. And so they started playing it, and next thing you know, within just a few days, it was in heavy, heavy rotation, and it just remained there for the longest time.
Yeah.
And we were all surprised. And of course, that at this point, all the radio stations with the call letters, had all theirs, and it just kind of exploded.
Yeah, going
and
nuts.
It made it to number 93 on the top 100, most played rock songs of all time.
Yeah, well, it should have been number 1. It's a great song. It's just like a great song. But I guess the big question is, did you help Papermate sell a ton of pencils?
I really don't know.
Like, they should tell you these things, Yeah, we sold like 5 gazillion pencils that year. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, we should get a cut for that,
right? This is what I'm talking about, Steve. It's all about the business.
That's right.
Now, Autograph, you guys also toured with Kiss, Motley Crue, Aerosmith, Whitesnake. I kind of have a feeling how you're going to answer. I could be completely wrong, but who was the craziest group to tour with?
Oh, by far, Motley Crue.
I knew you were going to say that. Had to be,
by
right?
far. It was so over the top that there's whole parts of the tour that I just don't even remember. And they are the same way, because when I ran into Tommy about a year after the tour, I said, do you remember what happened on that tour? And he goes, dude, I don't have a clue. I don't remember anything. And so
it's probably a good thing.
It was like I just had it. I just went, okay, that's it for me, because there's a whole section of the tour that I don't even remember. It was so over the top. And so I just quit everything. Didn't drink, didn't do anything at that point. I just went, okay, I'm completely straight now. And
good for you.
That way.
Good for you, Steve Lynch. You just said no. It was the whole Nancy Reagan thing, right? I say no.
Right. That's right.
Now, Steve, you broke up in 89. What led to the breakup?
Well, we were doing demos for Epic Records, and we were going to sign a 3-album deal with them after our 3-album deal ran out with RCA. And so we were making all these demos, and they were saying, oh, yeah, it's great stuff and everything. But what kind of nipped it in the bud was there was a city called Seattle, where I come from, and there's a scene that came out called grunge. And it put the kibosh on all the 80s bands.
Yeah.
Boom. All of a sudden, it was just over just like that.
Yeah.
And I can kind of understand it in a way, and I've talked about this a lot, and that's that the writing in the 80s, towards the end of the 80s, became so contrived because everything was just geared for radio hits.
Yeah.
And it was just so pasteurized and homogenized, the production and everything, just way too much reverb and everything. And I just didn't really like the direction it was going in. So when grunge came out, it was just raw. It was messy, but people loved it because the people were telling the truth in it. Yeah. It was from Seattle, a lot of depression, a lot of drug use, a lot of suicide and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But the youth could recognize it. Yeah. And I thought, you know what? That's like it was with me back in the 60s and the 70s. All the stuff that was written back then, it wasn't written for radio. Everybody wrote what they wanted to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it really kind of hit home. Like it really made me think about that a lot. And even though I wasn't a fan of it, I understood it.
It sounds like you just have a really great head on your shoulders. And you guys were way up there. I mean, you're touring with Van Halen, all these other great groups. You break up, so like the balloon is deflated, but you seem to turn it around. You taught guitar. You sold a lot of books.
Yeah, what I did at that point was I got an offer from St. Louis Music, and I was also promoting my 3 books that I had out at that time, and they wanted me to do clinics, and I ended up doing 325 clinics in 20 countries.
Wow.
And so it really helped boost sales on my book, and it really helped my books, and it really helped boost sales for St. Louis Music, because it was like Crate and Ampeg amplifiers and Alvarez guitars and everything. And so I was in Australia, New Zealand, South America. I did all the states except for Maine and Alaska. Those are the only 2 states I didn't do. And I did all of Europe. And it was just an incredible experience. It was really cool. And so I taught a lot of stuff out of my books. And so, of course, that boosted sales for my books. And and after that, I did a solo album. I came back to LA and I did a solo album, and it's called Network 23. And it never got released because the company that I was recording with, Sasapa Records, who had a distribution deal with SEMA. Remember SEMA? Capital EMI Manhattan.
Yes.
So it was a great deal that I had, but the record company went bankrupt while I was in the studio.
Oh, gosh.
So I had money saved from, doing all the clinics. And so I went back to LA. We were recording in Ohio. And I went back to LA and finished some tracks there. And then I went out and I did some more clinics again. And then I came back and I just said, I'm out of here. I've done the LA scene for 15 years now.
Yeah.
I want to go somewhere else. And so this was 1992. April 22nd of 1992, because I left with my girlfriend at the time, and we had the truck loaded up, my car being towed behind it, and we were heading for Florida, for Fort Lauderdale. And when we got near Phoenix, I was able to get in the radio station, and it came on saying all these riots were breaking out and everything in LA. It was the Rodney King thing.
Oh, wow.
And it was the Rodney King riots.
So you got out right in time.
And so me and my girlfriend looked at each other and just high-fived each other. we just made it out of there. But as soon as we got into Phoenix, we called some friends, from payphones, and made sure they were okay and that they were safe and everything. So, and then we just continued on our way, and moved to Fort Lauderdale for 5 years.
But it sounds like you had a great transition from the band breaking up to literally just sliding into not really a new career, but a new side of the career. So you were able to still support yourself and, stay into the music business.
Right. And that's what I did. Like with the, what I was going to finish saying too, was with the Network 23 album, what happened was after the company went bankrupt, then there was a clause in there where I couldn't release it for 10 years. So I wasn't able to release it really till 2004.
Oh my goodness.
So
that's a long time.
That's a long time. Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah. And by that time, I had this guy, Marco Babino, that used to be with Geffen Records. He was shopping it for me, but he said, you know what? It's just, nobody wants to hear it because you have a stigma attached to your name. You're an 80s guitar player. And I said, no, but I'm not really. I play all this other stuff too, And, and that album sounds nothing like 80s at all. And so, but, I had that stigma attached to me, so nobody even wanted to listen to it.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's the way it works. So.
Well, but here you are now, you and your beautiful fiance, Alena. You've got your new project, 222. Coming out. Well, it's out, right? And you have a release coming out on Black Friday. Tell us about that.
Well, we're writing on the songs right now. We've been tossing around ideas left and right, and we've been omitting things.
Oh, so you have a lot of stuff.
Didn't feel we're strong enough.
Yeah.
Because we really want every song that we release to be very strong.
Yeah.
and we're not really gearing it towards radio. We just write whatever we want.
Perfect.
And that's the way Alena is. She just wants to, be able to feel the song.
Yeah. Well,
and she is such a brilliant vocalist and lyricist that, when I first heard her voice and her recordings, I just went, oh my God, I've got to do something with her. And so
now, how did you guys meet?
We met through HMG Rocks. It's a radio station actually out of Arkansas, and they also have an outlet in Los Angeles. And she did a radio interview earlier in the day, and then I did an interview later that same day. And the interviewer, Steve Torres, he said, "Well, I'm going to have on Steve Lynch later on." And she said, "Who's that?"
You gotta love it.
Yeah, and so she had no idea who I was. She didn't really know who Autograph was, but she knew the song "Turn Up the Radio." Because
who doesn't?
She was.
Who doesn't know that song?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
So, but she was totally immersed in the whole country thing at that time, and so, But what happened was, she looked me up, and I looked her up, and I went, "Oh, wow," on Facebook, and we just went kind of, "Oh."
I love you.
What's going to happen here? And so we started messaging each other, and then later on we started talking on the phone, and we just hit it off.
Yeah.
And so I feel very blessed for that. And so then we later on into the relationship we started talking about music and doing something together, and this is what became of it. So here we are.
I love it.
And I wanted to do different, Autograph had gotten back together, and I wanted to do something different because I've been playing Autograph songs for forever.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just thought, I want to do something different, because there's a whole different side to me, playing-wise and writing-wise, that I wanted to experiment with. And so she was, looking at another avenue to go down other than just playing country as well. And so that's when we started writing together and everything. And then eventually I left Autograph just to, commit all my time to just doing this project. But we're still going to be doing a few Autograph songs in our live set.
Okay.
And we'll be doing, a couple of her songs as well. And then also a couple of songs from my Network 23 album that she likes.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah. And so then the rest will be all original. But that's the way it's happened, and it just kind of just flowed into itself naturally. And right now we've gotten to the point of writing where we're going, wow, now we've finally found our place together.
Yeah.
In writing. And so the stuff is just coming together brilliantly. And so we're going into the studio within the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be releasing on Black Friday. And so we're going to just release one song at a time. And as you know, a lot of bands are doing that now.
That's
one song at a time.
Yes.
One thing that I really had a problem with when our first album with RCA was released was that Turn Up the Radio, of course, was a great song, but I'm thinking we have other songs on there that are really good. And this was the problem that I had with people putting out albums, and that's that they only got to hear one or two songs off the album.
It's so true. I remember that. How radio did that. It's like they forced you to listen to what they wanted you to hear. And I remember, I had tons of albums like everyone did. And on so many of the albums that I had, there were so many other songs that I never heard on the radio. I'm like, why isn't this being played?
Right. Well, they were inundated with so many bands and all these labels pushing all these P1s, P2 stations to play their stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was difficult to even get one song on if you're a new band.
Yeah.
Let alone two or three or four. But I always thought about that. And when Alena and I were discussing, this project, we said, let's just release one song at a time. And that way people get to digest it and they get to hear what we're all about.
Right.
And then we release another song. once that one's been out for a few months,
Yeah.
and then we just let them digest that for a little bit. But we're taking the same approach as, like, I'd say, like Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Moody Blues, all these bands back then when they just wrote what they felt. And this really got to me when I heard about this. Pink Floyd didn't do interviews and they didn't release singles, and either did Led Zeppelin. They ran their songs together so that they couldn't be played as singles.
Oh, gotcha.
And so what you heard on a lot of kind of the underground FM stations was you'd hear the whole side of the
Yes.
album. In fact, when FM first started, AM was the big thing that everybody listened to in their cars back in the 60s and everything.
Right.
When FM first started, they didn't have any commercials, and what they did was they just played the album one side, and then they'd take a little break, and then they'd play the other side. And I remember listening to that
Yep.
when FM first started out as a commercial, not as a commercial, but it became commercial, of course. But I always thought, wow, I get to hear the whole album. That's so cool because, like Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2, all the songs are great on that.
Yeah.
And Dark Side of the Moon, every song's great on that.
I know.
So, we really thought about that, when, we were dealing with this project, and we just thought, let's just write what we want. Let's not try to gear it for radio. Let's write exactly what we really feel. Let's share our emotions on this and just do it that way. And that's the beauty of it, is just being able to take your time and write what you need. We're not under pressure from a record company.
Right.
We don't really want to sign with a record company. That's not what we want to do. We kind of want to do everything ourselves.
Yeah.
And like I was with the last version of Autograph, I was the tour manager, and
Oh,
I
wow.
will be with this project and handle the monies and stuff. And Alena will be the business manager, and she's absolutely superb at that, and she's superb at marketing. And so there you have it. I mean, pretty much between the two of us, we can handle everything.
That's right. You're going to take on the world. And I have to give a shout out to Alena's song, Do You Miss Me Tonight? I am not, I am a rock girl. I am. But I did listen to that. I listened to it on YouTube. Love it. I love that song. So
Yeah.
I hope it takes off for her. So excited to see what you both do next. We're all going to be watching. Thank you so much, Steve, for hanging out. And I do have one more question. What is the biggest takeaway for you from being a musician in the 80s to help you continue to grow your music today?
It's the listeners, being able to touch people with your music. And that's the most important thing, and to share your story through song. And I think that's what everybody thrives for. It's never been for me about being famous. That's never really occurred to me, and I still look at myself as just being Steve Lynch, the guitar player. So what? But just being able to share my guitar playing and my writing and my ideas with people, and it's the same with Alena. She's very humble, even though she's brilliant. She's very humble, and so that's what we're doing. We're just writing from our hearts, and we hope that everybody likes it, and I'm sure they will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. All the best to you both. When you do decide to get married, I will be your officiant because I do that too. So
okay, you got it.
I appreciate you for spending time with us. I really, really do. All my love to you and Alena. And again, the very, very best to the both of you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it.